More at dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Coming up next after the news, Hour 1 of the latest episode of Free Talk Live, here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nina Maria Potts with the latest world news. The US and Mexico have struck a deal to delay Washington imposing 25% tariffs on Mexican goods. It follows a phone call between the two leaders. Tariffs on Canadian and Chinese goods were still due to come into effect on Tuesday, although President Trump has been speaking to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
An apparent climb down from the White House following a phone call between the US and Mexican leaders. Donald Trump spoke to his counterpart, Claudia Sheinbaum, during which he said he'd had a very friendly conversation in which she had agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers to police Mexico's border with the United States. Trump said those soldiers would specifically be designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants entering the United States. It means the anticipated 25% tariffs against Mexico are now on pause for 1 month. I'm Nick Harper in Washington.
China's ambassador to the United Nations says there are no winners in a trade war. Fu Tong was addressing US President Donald Trump's announcement that he's placing the 10% tariff on all imports from China. Speaking in New York on Monday, Tong said if the impasse is not resolved, his country may be forced to take countermeasures.
There is no winner in a trade war. And we do hope that the U.S. should look at its own problems, really find a solution that is beneficial not to himself and also to the whole world. And frankly speaking, I don't think that raising tariffs is beneficial to the U.S. itself.
The U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, is being absorbed into the State Department. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Monday he's the acting administrator for the aid group. Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
President Trump said there was tremendous fraud at USAID and that the international aid agency had previously been run by, quote, lunatics. Employees were told to stay home from the organisation on Monday as Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it's being absorbed by the State Department. He's accused employees of obscuring details of their work and not cooperating with reasonable questions. Ultimately, he said the USAID has to align with US foreign policy, but Democrats have warned the moves against the aid agency are counterproductive. Senator Andy Kim said the vindictive way of trying to shut down USAID sends signals all over the world that we are a nation at war with itself. Caroline Malone, Washington.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington, D.C., ahead of meeting U.S. President Trump during a pivotal moment for the Middle East. Before boarding his plane, Netanyahu said he believed that they could achieve a remarkable era of peace through strength. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, fresh questions about whether the war between Russia and Ukraine really is heading towards a conclusion. President Trump indicated on Friday that discussions are underway at a high level between Moscow and Washington. He would not be drawn on whether he has already spoken to Vladimir Putin about the need for peace negotiations. But some analysts are wondering whether there really is sufficient impetus for the Kremlin to wrap up its military campaign. Air Vice Marshal Marshal Sean Bell is a military analyst and co-host of the Red Matrix podcast.
There was a hope that Putin would be prepared to negotiate with Trump, but the question is why? At the moment, Russia is on the front foot. It is winning. The ceasefires generally only happen when one side wins, the other side loses, or you end up with a stalemate. It's a boring military strategy, but the fact is Russia used to do frontal assaults. Now they're encircling villages and towns along the way, strangling the Ukrainians out of them. Now this takes months, normally 6 to 9 months, but the Russian military are going ahead. So there's no evidence at all that the Russian military are preparing for a pause anytime soon, despite the fact there's a lot of sort of air of expectation that Trump will be able to bring this all to a halt, and very soon.
It will fall to retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg to see whether Moscow and Kiev can be prodded to the negotiating table. He is President Trump's new special representative to Ukraine and Russia. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And a reminder now of the hour's top story. The US and Mexico have struck a deal to delay Washington imposing 25% tariffs on Mexican goods. It follows a phone call between the two leaders. Tariffs on Canadian and Chinese goods were still due to come into effect on Tuesday. And that's the latest world news from Feature Story News. I'm Nina Maria Potts in Washington.
If you're the parent of a man-child, you know how frustrating it can sometimes be. The piercing sound of his video games waking you up at 2 a.m. His insatiable hunger and inability to cook anything for himself. The messes he makes. The stress can be overwhelming.
Something will set them off, such as their man-child will tell them that they don't know how to tie a tie even though they're almost 30. They'll start shaking them and yelling and saying, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why don't you get a real job instead of working part-time at a board game store?"
The results of shaken man-child syndrome are devastating. Trauma caused by the brain colliding with the inside of the man-child's skull can lead to cognitive disabilities, making it even more unlikely he'll finally marry the girl he's been having a long-distance online relationship with for 6 years. Or it can even lead to death.
He's not spilling cereal all over the couch or leaving his beard clippings in the bathroom sink intentionally. He truly does not know what he's doing.
For the Lab Report, I'm Stuart Adams.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.